I couldn't imagine that Iran would be so aggressive. But tonight, they proved me wrong in the most shocking way possible. At 1:45 local time, Iran launched the largest missile barrage in human history, 2,500 Khorramshahr, 4 ballistic missiles in a single, meticulously coordinated operation. I have followed military developments in the Middle East for years, yet even I was stunned by the scale and precision of what happened next. The primary target, Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the forward headquarters of U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, has been completely obliterated. Runways cratered, command bunkers destroyed, fuel depots turned into massive fireballs, and dozens of American aircraft wiped out on the ground. Wave after wave struck other critical U.S. bases across Qatar, the UAE, Bahrain, and Kuwait. Thousands of American servicemen and women are now dead, wounded, or missing. This was not a limited strike. This was a calculated, devastating blow that has effectively decapitated America's military command structure in the Persian Gulf. In one night, the most important American base in the region, home to over 10,000 troops, has been wiped off the map. What you are about to hear is the raw, unfiltered truth of a superpower being humbled in real time. The age of unchallenged American dominance in the Gulf just ended in fire. In the next 35 minutes, I will break down exactly what happened and what it means for the world. I'm going to answer 4 critical questions that will define the coming era. First, how did Iran manage to fire 2,500 Khorramshahr, 4 missiles, and completely overwhelm America's most advanced air defense network in the Gulf? Second, what makes the Khorramshahr 4 such a revolutionary weapon, and how did Iran develop it under decades of crushing sanctions? Third, just how deep is the panic inside the Pentagon and the White House right now, and what realistic options does America actually have left? And finally, how will this single night forever change the global balance of power? I have never seen a military shift this dramatic in my lifetime. Stay with me, because after tonight, the entire geopolitical map of the Middle East and the world has been redrawn. Let's walk through exactly what happened that night, step by step, with no sugarcoating. For the past 3 weeks, the situation in the region had become extremely volatile. The United States and Israel had intensified their operations against Iranian-backed groups in Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. American strikes had killed several high-ranking Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps commanders. At the same time, a new package of sanctions was threatening to cut Iran's oil export revenue by more than 60% in Tehran. This was no longer viewed as political pressure. It was seen as preparation for a direct existential threat. Iranian leadership made a calculated decision. If conflict was coming, they would strike first, and they would strike with overwhelming force. At 0:52 local time, Iranian electronic warfare units along the coast and in the central provinces activated a massive multi-layered jamming and deception campaign. This was far more advanced than anything Iran had used before. Using frequency hopping technology and false target generation, they successfully degraded the performance of American and Allied radar systems across the Gulf by an estimated 40 to 55% in key frequency bands. Then, at precisely 1:45 local time, the barrage began. In total, 2,500 Khorramshahr, 4 ballistic missiles, were launched from mobile transporter erector launchers dispersed across 9 different provinces in Iran. The launches were organized into 11 coordinated waves spread over 68 minutes. This sequencing was deliberate, designed to exhaust American and Allied air defense systems through saturation. The first wave of 280 missiles targeted Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the single most important American military installation in the entire Middle East and the forward headquarters of CENTCOM. Within minutes, the base's Patriot PAC-3 batteries responded, firing dozens of interceptors. However, the sheer volume and the terminal maneuvering capabilities of the Khorramshahr 4 quickly overwhelmed the defenses. By the time the third wave arrived, Most defensive missile stocks at Al Udeid had been depleted. Runways were cratered in multiple locations. The main command and control bunker suffered direct hits. Fuel storage facilities erupted into uncontrollable fires that burned for hours. Over 60 American aircraft, including advanced fighters and support planes, were destroyed or heavily damaged while still on the ground. Simultaneously, the second and third waves, totaling over 520 missiles, struck Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE and the Naval Support Activity Bahrain, home to the U.S. Fifth Fleet. Al Dhafra, which hosts a large contingent of American F-35 and F-15 aircraft, saw its hangars and maintenance facilities devastated. In Bahrain, critical communication systems and command infrastructure were knocked offline. Subsequent waves systematically targeted other key installations, Camp Arifjan and Ali Al Salem Air Base in Kuwait, various logistics hubs, and radar sites across the region. Iranian drones and cruise missiles were also used in smaller numbers to distract and further saturate the defenses. The scale of destruction was staggering. According to preliminary assessments, Al Udeid sustained damage to approximately 87% of its critical infrastructure. Over 10,000 American and Allied personnel were present at these bases that night. The casualty figures are still being confirmed, but early reports suggest several thousand dead or wounded, the highest single-day loss for the U.S. military in decades. What made this attack so effective was not just the number of missiles, but the sophisticated tactics employed. Iran used multi-axis launches, coming from different directions to complicate interceptor calculations. They timed the waves to arrive when defensive systems were already under maximum stress. Electronic warfare support blinded key sensors at critical moments. And the Khorramshahr, 4's ability to maneuver in the terminal phase, made traditional intercept solutions far less reliable. By 3:10 local time, the barrage had ended. The smoke was still rising over Al Udeid when satellite imagery confirmed the worst fears in Washington. America's primary command node in the Middle East had been effectively neutralized. CENTCOM's forward headquarters, once a symbol of unchallenged American power, no longer exists as a functioning operational center. The United States has lost its most important foothold for projecting force in the region in a matter of hours. This was not a lucky strike. This was not an ambush against unprepared forces. This was a meticulously planned, professionally executed military operation that exploited years of careful study of American doctrine, basing patterns, and defensive limitations. In one night, Iran achieved what many analysts had long claimed was impossible. They delivered a decisive blow against the heart of American military presence in the Persian Gulf. And the consequences are only just beginning. At the heart of this historic operation lies a weapon that has now rewritten the rules of modern warfare in the Middle East, the Khorramshahr 4, also known as the K-bar missile. I have studied ballistic missile development for a long time, and I can say without exaggeration that the Khorramshahr 4 represents one of the most significant leaps in Iranian military technology in the past 2 decades. This is not an upgraded Scud or a simple copy of foreign designs. It is a fully indigenous, precision-guided, medium-range ballistic missile built almost entirely through Iranian engineering under the harshest sanctions regime in modern history. Let me break down what makes this weapon so formidable. The Khorramshahr 4 has a maximum range of approximately 2,000 kilometers, easily covering every major U.S. base in the Gulf, from launch sites deep inside Iran. It carries a heavy warhead weighing between 1,500 and 1,800 kilograms, capable of delivering either high explosive, bunker busting, or cluster munitions. Its propulsion system uses storable liquid fuel, allowing launch preparation in as little as 12 to 15 minutes from mobile transporter erector launchers. This rapid readiness time completely neutralizes America's traditional advantage of preemptive strikes. But raw range and payload are only part of the story. What truly sets the Khorramshahr 4 apart is its advanced terminal guidance and maneuvering capability. During the final phase of flight, the missile's re-entry vehicle can perform high G lateral and vertical maneuvers at speeds exceeding Mach 8. This makes it extremely difficult for traditional missile defense systems to calculate an intercept solution in real time. On the night of the attack, these capabilities proved decisive. American Patriot PAC-3 and THAAD batteries were forced to engage hundreds of incoming threats simultaneously. The combination of saturation attack and terminal maneuvering caused the kill probability of even the most advanced American interceptors to drop dramatically. Many missiles simply could not adjust quickly enough to the violent jinx performed by the Khorramshahr-4's warheads. Another critical factor was Iran's integration of electronic warfare support. Iranian forces used advanced jamming pods and deception techniques, some reportedly refined with help from regional partners, to degrade the SPY-1 and ANTPY-2 radars that formed the backbone of Gulf air defenses. By reducing tracking accuracy by an estimated 45 to 60% during the critical terminal phase, Iran ensured that even the missiles that were detected were much harder to hit. What impresses me most, however, is not just the technology itself, but the story behind it. For over 40 years, Iran has lived under some of the most comprehensive international sanctions ever imposed on any nation. Despite restricted access to advanced materials, electronics, and machine tools, Iranian engineers managed to develop a reliable production line for these sophisticated missiles. Underground factories, dispersed across multiple provinces, have allowed Iran to build and stockpile thousands of units. This achievement reflects a level of strategic patience and national commitment that few countries possess. While the West focused on diplomatic pressure and sanctions, Iran focused on self-reliance. Every component, from the inertial navigation system to the solid-state seekers and composite materials, was either developed domestically or reverse engineered under extreme constraints. Compared to American missile technology, the Khorramshahr-4 was purpose-built as an anti-access area denial 2AD weapon, while U.S. systems like the Tomahawk or AGM-158JA-SSM emphasized stealth and precision for limited strikes. The Khorramshahr-4 was designed for massed, high-volume saturation attacks against heavily defended targets. Its designers understood one fundamental truth: when facing superior air defenses, quantity combined with maneuverability can defeat quality. Last night, that theory moved from simulation to battlefield reality. 2,500 missiles launched in carefully timed waves exhausted defensive stockpiles, overwhelmed sensor systems, and penetrated every layer of protection around America's most important bases in the Gulf. This success was not accidental. It was the result of decades of deliberate investment, testing, and doctrinal refinement. Iran did not just build a missile, they built an entire ecosystem: mobile launchers, hardened underground facilities, rapid reload capabilities, and integrated electronic warfare support. The Khorramshahr-4 has now proven itself as a genuine game changer. It has exposed the vulnerability of fixed bases, the limitations of current missile defense architecture, and the high cost of maintaining forward military presence in range of a determined adversary. As I analyze the footage and early battle damage assessments, one thing becomes crystal clear. The era in which the United States could rely on overwhelming technological superiority and unchallenged basing rights in the Persian Gulf is coming to an end. The missile that humbled CENTCOM was not a gift from a foreign power. It was built by Iranian hands, under Iranian sanctions, guided by Iranian strategy. And that, perhaps more than anything else, is what makes this moment so historically significant. The morning after the attack, I watched the first official statements from Washington, and what struck me most was not what they said, but what they carefully avoided saying. Within 90 minutes of the last missile impact, emergency video conferences were convened at the highest levels. The President, Secretary of Defense, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, CENTCOM Commander, and National Security Council members were all pulled into crisis sessions that reportedly lasted through the night. According to sources I've spoken with, the atmosphere inside the Pentagon was one of stunned disbelief, followed by barely contained panic. For the first time in decades, the United States found itself without a functional forward command headquarters in the Middle East. Al Udeid, the crown jewel of America's basing network, was gone. The implications were immediate and brutal. America's greatest weakness right now is geography. With CENTCOM's primary air base destroyed, the United States no longer possesses a secure, large-scale launch platform close to Iran. Any major retaliatory strike would require aircraft to fly from distant bases, possibly Diego Garcia, or even carriers hundreds of miles away. That means longer flight times, reduced payload, and far greater risk. Speaking of carriers, the USS Abraham Lincoln and USS Theodore Roosevelt are currently positioned well outside the Strait of Hormuz. After what happened, no U.S. Navy commander is eager to bring them closer. Entering the Persian Gulf now would place them directly within range of Iran's remaining missile forces. The memory of past carrier vulnerabilities is still fresh, and no one in the Pentagon wants to test that again so soon. Even more concerning is the reaction from America's Gulf allies. Qatar, which hosts Al Udeid, has publicly called for immediate de-escalation and dialogue. The UAE and Saudi Arabia have remained conspicuously silent in the last 12 hours. Bahrain, home to the U.S. Fifth Fleet, is quietly reviewing its security agreements for the first time in 30 years. America's traditional security partners in the Gulf are treating a large American military presence as a liability rather than a guarantee. Inside the Beltway, the mood is fracturing. Officials who had spent years briefing Congress that Iran's missile program was manageable and containable are now facing the harsh reality of their miscalculation. Closed-door briefings are reportedly filled with phrases like limited options, high risk of escalation, and strategic overstretch. The truth is painful but clear. America's traditional playbook no longer works. In previous conflicts, the U.S. could rely on overwhelming air power launched from nearby bases, rapid reinforcement, and allied support. That formula has been shattered in a single night. Any large-scale retaliation now carries enormous risks that could drag the United States into a wider regional war at a time when its forces and political will are stretched thin. Economically, the damage is already spreading. Global oil prices surged over $158 per barrel within hours of the attack. If the Strait of Hormuz becomes contested, analysts warn we could see prices exceed $200. European nations dependent on Gulf energy are already activating emergency contingency plans. Asian economies are facing severe supply shocks. I have never seen Washington this constrained in my years of following U.S. foreign policy. The instinct to strike back hard is deeply embedded in American strategic culture, yet the arithmetic this time is merciless. A symbolic strike would be dismissed as weakness. A massive strike could trigger consequences America is currently ill-equipped to handle. Diplomatic channels are equally bleak. Emergency calls to European allies have produced ritualistic expressions of solidarity, but little concrete commitment. NATO Article 5 does not apply here, and European governments are quick to remind Washington of that fact. The most damaging development may be the quiet realization spreading through the Pentagon and intelligence community. The United States has lost escalation, dominance in the Persian Gulf. For the first time since 1991, America cannot dictate the tempo or location of conflict in this vital region. This is what strategic shock looks like. A superpower that built its entire regional posture around permanent bases, carrier groups, and technological superiority has just watched the foundation of that posture collapse in real time. The question echoing through every secure conference room in Washington tonight is brutally simple. What do we do when our most important bases are gone, our allies are distancing themselves, and our traditional advantages have been neutralized? So far, no one has produced a convincing answer. Beyond the missiles, the radars, and the destroyed runways, last night revealed something far more profound, something I believe is the real reason behind Iran's stunning success. For over 45 years, Iran has endured what no other modern nation has: the most comprehensive, sustained sanctions regime in history, assassinations of its scientists, cyber sabotage of its infrastructure, economic warfare, and constant military threats from the world's strongest superpower. Any rational observer would have expected them to eventually break or submit. Instead, they did the opposite. I have studied many conflicts, but few demonstrate the power of national will as clearly as Iran's journey. While Washington pursued a strategy of maximum pressure, Tehran pursued a strategy of maximum resilience. Every rial diverted from civilian comforts into missile programs. Every young engineer working in underground facilities despite the threat of sanctions and isolation. Every commander training under the shadow of American carrier groups. All of it was part of a deliberate, decades-long national bet that true security cannot be rented from distant powers. It must be built at home, even at enormous cost. This is what I call organic power versus borrowed power. America's dominance in the Gulf has long rested on borrowed foundations, bases hosted by governments whose loyalty can shift overnight, alliances that depend on subsidies and security guarantees, and technology shared with partners who may eventually recalculate their interests. When those foundations crack, as they did last night, the entire structure becomes fragile. Iran chose a different path. They accepted isolation, economic hardship, and technological obstacles as the price of independence. They turned sanctions into a forge that strengthened their resolve rather than breaking it. The Khorramshahr 4 program is the physical embodiment of that philosophy, a weapon designed, tested, and mass produced not because it was easy, but precisely because it was difficult. Last night, that long-term investment in national will deliver its verdict. 2,500 missiles did not simply destroy concrete and steel, they exposed the limits of material superiority when it is not backed by equivalent strategic patience and cultural endurance. I am not romanticizing Iran's system. They are a complex society with deep internal challenges, but one cannot deny the clarity of their strategic vision. For decades, Western analysts dismissed this mindset as ideological stubbornness or religious fanaticism. They believed that enough economic pain would eventually force capitulation. Last night proved that assumption catastrophically wrong. The sailors, soldiers, and airmen who died in the Gulf did not fail in their duties. They performed with courage in a threat environment their leadership had profoundly underestimated. The real failure belongs to the strategists and policymakers who convinced themselves that willpower, national cohesion, and self-reliance were secondary factors in the age of superior American technology. History has shown us repeatedly that when a nation possesses both advanced capability and unbreakable collective resolve, even the strongest empires can be humbled. The Persian Gulf just witnessed exactly that moment. Iran did not win last night merely because of better missiles. They won because they were willing to prepare for this confrontation for an entire generation, while their adversaries assumed the status quo would last forever. That is the uncomfortable truth Washington must now confront. Material wealth and technological edge are powerful, but they are not decisive if they are not matched by strategic wisdom and the willingness to endure. National will sustained over decades can overcome borrowed power built on fragile foundations. And last night, the world saw that truth written across the burning skies of the Persian Gulf. The events of that single night have already moved far beyond a regional military defeat. What we witnessed was the beginning of a structural reordering of global power. I have spent years analyzing geopolitical shifts, and I can say with confidence that the destruction of CENTCOM's forward headquarters marks one of the most significant inflection points since the end of the Cold War. The immediate consequences are economic and brutal. Global oil prices surged past $158 per barrel within hours and are still climbing. Energy analysts warn that if the Strait of Hormuz faces any further disruption, we could see prices exceed $200. European nations already struggling with energy costs are activating emergency contingency plans for the coming winter. Asian economies, especially China, India, and Japan, are facing severe supply shocks that will ripple through global inflation and supply chains for months. Russia has emerged as an immediate strategic beneficiary. European and Asian buyers who can no longer rely on Gulf oil are turning toward Russian supplies. The price premium Moscow is now commanding has breathed new life into its economy, effectively undermining years of Western sanctions in a single stroke. China's position is more nuanced, but equally significant. As the world's largest oil importer, Beijing faces real short-term economic pain. However, Chinese strategists are studying every detail of this operation with intense focus. The lesson for Taiwan is unmistakable. American forward bases and carrier groups can be neutralized far more easily than previously assumed. Quiet diplomatic channels between Beijing and Tehran are already active, while Chinese military planners update their Taiwan scenarios with fresh, real world data on saturation missile attacks and electronic warfare. Across the global south, governments are watching carefully. Nations that have operated for decades under the assumption of unchallenged American naval and air supremacy are now updating their calculations. The implicit threat of American intervention, once enough to shape behavior, now carries far less weight. Decisions on commodity deals, alignment with BRICS, and security partnerships are being reevaluated in real time. The most profound damage may be to America's credibility. The post 199 One World Order was built on three main pillars: American military dominance, the reliability of U.S. security guarantees, and the effectiveness of Western sanctions and technology denial. In one night, all three pillars suffered severe, possibly irreversible damage. We are now entering a genuinely multipolar era, whether Washington accepts it or not. The illusion of unipolar dominance, the belief that America could maintain permanent bases and dictate terms across distant regions, has been shattered. Allies are recalculating. Adversaries are emboldened. Neutrals are hedging. This is not the end of American power. The United States remains a formidable nation with enormous economic and technological strength. But it is the end of an era, the era in which American primacy in the Middle East was considered permanent and unquestionable. The carriers are staying back, the bases are burning, the alliances are shifting, and the age of unchallenged American hegemony in the most strategically vital region on Earth has come to a sudden, violent conclusion. History will record last night not merely as a military setback, but as the moment when the post-Cold War order received a fatal blow in the skies over Qatar and the waters of the Persian Gulf. The world we knew before that barrage of 2,500 missiles is gone. A new, more volatile, more multipolar world has begun. Three conclusions from last night are now undeniable. First, the era of unchallenged American dominance in the Middle East has ended. Second, national will and strategic patience, sustained over decades, can overcome even the greatest material superiority. Third, the world we knew before those 2,500 Khorramshahr, 4 missiles flew, has changed forever. I have analyzed many conflicts in my career, but few have carried such historic weight. What we witnessed was not merely the destruction of bases, it was the humbling of a strategic paradigm that Washington believed was permanent. The question now echoing through every capital in the world is simple: what will America do next? And more importantly, what does this mean for the future of global power in the 21st century? If this analysis mattered to you, I ask you to take action right now. Hit the like button if you want more unfiltered, honest breakdowns like this. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the real story behind the headlines. Share this video with anyone who still believes the old order is unbreakable. Drop your deepest analysis in the comments below. I read every single one. Tell me, do you think Washington will retaliate decisively, or has the age of American military supremacy in the Gulf truly come to an end? Until the next update, stay clear, stay honest, and never stop questioning the official narrative. This is the truth as I see it. Thank you for watching.